Okay, so good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, where you are. Welcome to XR Must next live video discussion. As the last time, it will be moderated by Michael Barngrover, based in Turkey. And this time we want to chat about immersive art and exhibition, not forgetting the live part of things we discussed last time, but we hope to organize some other chat about that part two another time. But for today, I will leave Michael to handle the discussion and to present every three guests we have. Michael, your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you very much to you and XR Must and to all the readership and all the members of the XR Must community for following these events. We aim to really share a lot of experience, a lot of firsthand practical insights through these talks. The talk today will be about immersive art and the exhibition of that art, and of course, an immersive exhibition of art that may itself not be an immersive work, but is being exhibited immersively. So this is a spectrum, and it's a very big topic, kind of like every topic that we seem to want to look at. Um, but despite the fact that the topic is very big, and there's a lot of different angles. I've selected, and I'm very happy that our three speakers agreed to join us today. They come from a couple different, three each comes from three different perspective, a different type of experience, a different type of view, and different roles. None of them have just one role. They all take on multiple roles, which I think is this is a commonality to anything having to do with VR and AR and all these related technologies. We don't have the luxury of just doing one thing. We all have to do multiple things. So our three speakers today, we have Martina Menegon, is an artist from Austria, who is both a curator and an artist and an educator, and she'll talk about all of that and more. We have Elhem Younes, who is a researcher, an artist, and also has experience working with one of the premier exhibitions in Recto Verso recently. And then we have, finally but not least, of course, Zonka Kirkchov, who is a master of so many different things. But one of the things that the reason he was very top of my mind to invite here is he is someone who's provided all the many of the technical and curatorial support for exhibitions throughout Europe, both physically and virtually, before the pandemic and during it. And so, one of the topics I'd like us to talk about, if the conversation leads to that, is where we see the sustainability of hybrid events, and maybe even how we define what is actually a hybrid event versus a physical event with some stuff online if you can't come, and then practically where that goes, and for who we're doing that for, if not just the people here, in the region of Europe. Um, the way the format of this event will be is I will give each speaker a chance to introduce themselves for a few minutes, talk about maybe how they came to this type of work, to immersive exhibition and to art in the space, um, talk about some of their recent experiences and projects and work. And then following that, we'll have a very casual conversation, because the point of these conversations is not to make like presentations, but really to share experience. And in this example, and I think maybe in the last one as well, the three speakers have not met each other before. So this is actually an opportunity for them to maybe learn from each other, or just maybe explore something with a peer. And at the end of that, with about 10 to 15 minutes to go in the hour, is when we reserve some time for Q&A with the audience. So if you have any questions, feel free to kind of maybe write them in the chat, or otherwise kind of hold on to them until that last part, and we'll do our best to make sure we get to them. And of course, the speakers may make themselves available later. It's up to them, not to put any pressure. But if you have a really, you know who they are, so you can definitely reach out to them if you have some important question that couldn't be captured during the event today. So first, I would like to invite Elhem to introduce herself, and then following that, Martina, and then Zonka, and then we'll go into the open discussion after that.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you again for the invitation to participate in this roundtable. So I'm Elhem Younes. I am an artist and researcher. And I also used to work with Judith Guez, founder of the festival Recto Verso, as an assistant art director. So to say few words
J'arrive chez, je
about
travaille un tout petit peu, j'arrive, d'accord?
my background. So I come from fine art school
Ok.
with a
Tu vas jouer un
specialty
peu
in
avec maman?
engraving. And I've been
Non, non, attends. Laisse mon
interested
casque tranquille.
after being questioning, mental
J'ai coupé le son,
states
donc vous pouvez
towards
faire du bruit si vous
artistic
voulez.
creation and everything. And
Ah, je reviens. Papa travaille
followed
un
my
peu.
studies in
D'accord?
aesthetics in Paris. And then, since I was thinking also about how to create immersive experiences and immersive, environments, um, I um, I did a PhD in University Paris 8, focusing on this specific matter with a production of some pieces of art, and I was particularly interested in questioning the necessary and sufficient conditions to create an immersive environment. Um, by taking the dream state as an apparatus to analyze and to see how can we depict this necessary and sufficient conditions to create an immersive experience, and then to expand it on other types of experiences. So, like oniric experiences that induces the change in the mental state, etc. So during this PhD, to say, I created like an interactive installation based on the study, and also based on the study of the relationship between visual inputs and eye behavior. So to induce this altered, consciousness state. And the interactive installation called Anima is based on eye tracking technology, and it allows users to create abstract drawings using the only the eye movement, but using the unconscious eye movements. Um, so um, so um, Afterwards, so I started working for Recto Verso Art Festival as an assistant art director. So my artistic background was very useful, for this for me, especially when we think about how to make, say, like immersive exhibition, how to think also the meaning of works once they are put all together, etc. Um, and So I worked for a couple, during, let's say, three editions. The first one is like split it in two, let's say. One 100% virtual, and the second one 100%, no, not 100%, hybrid. That was in 2020, in 2021. So during the virtual edition, it was on the topic of a virtual exhibition, real exhibitions on online art. And the idea for us is to think and to question the emergent, artistic forms in this new era, you know, especially after the COVID. We created this conference program to question, you know, what about digital art today, like with a historical perspective, what means to create digital art today. We also organized a virtual exhibition, so in a virtual world called Laval Virtual World, with like many rooms where we can, you know, uh, um, uh, add all this online art and think about how to present it. And then in the physical or more hybrid edition, the idea is to exhibit this online art, to make it accessible for the visitor, to question also the emergent categories, and to connect the physical world to the virtual world. So we invited, for example, an artist to make a performance. She was in the virtual world, and she was interacting with visitors in, in the real world, like in the physical venue. So I can talk more about this one. So just to give you um, uh, an overview.
Excellent. Thank you, Elhem.
Thank you.
And now, Martina, would you please take a few minutes to introduce yourself and your work and projects?
Sure. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Martina Menegon. I'm an Italian artist based in Vienna, Austria, since a while now. As uh, you already heard, I'm both an artist, a curator, and an educator. So I'm teaching currently at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna at the Department of Transmedia Art. And my course is specifically directed to virtual, augmented reality, 3D scanning technology, motion captures, and whatnot. So it's a very experimental class I'm giving and I'm teaching. And I will maybe take the chance to share a couple of links in the chat later on. Yeah, and as an artist, I come from an interactive art background. I did interactive performances and installations between, yeah, I think the last 15 years, meanwhile. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I really focused myself on creating virtual and augmented reality mainly, but also virtual installation in general. So I've been showing my work in both physical and online world since a while. So not only during pandemic. I've been, for example, commissioned in 2016 to create a site-specific room for the Paper Scene Gallery, which is still available online. You can still download it. It's not a multiplayer or a social VR space, but nevertheless was a very early kind of virtual space you could experience. And in terms of like immersive curation, so in 2020, when the pandemic hit everywhere and we started to have the lockdowns, it became very problematic for me, apart as an artist, not to have exhibitions to, present my work to. It was very problematic to teach because I was planning to teach VR. My students have no access to VR headset. And in Austria, the lockdown arrived in March, so that meant the semester already started, which was very problematic for me. And I had to really quickly find a solution. And I remember there were a lot of discussions online between the whole circle of our digital artists I'm connected to, of where are we going now that we can't go out, and where are we exhibiting art, where are we performing and whatnot. And then someone was mentioning Mozilla Hubs, and I just had a quick look at it and realized, okay, that is perfect. I can go there with my students. I can have not the classic Zoom that everyone was doing. I was kind of bothered since the beginning with that. It was an easy tool to learn. It didn't ask you to have an account for the audience. If you want to create, you just have to give your whatever email you want, you have access to. And so I started to teach Mozilla Hubs, and at the same time, I started to rethink my virtual reality projects for Mozilla Hubs. So I basically took some elements of them and then transpose them or translate them for a social virtual space like Mozilla Hubs, with all the crazy limitations that comes in play there. And I also started to talk with Eva Fischer, which is the director and artistic director of Soundframe, which has been creating audiovisual and digital festival in Vienna for a very long time. And we were thinking about the potential of showing virtual art in their kind of natural habitat, which is the virtual. And so we, together with Pausanias, founded the Area for Virtual Art, which is basically a virtual space for virtual art. So I've been both showing my works there, but also curating exhibitions there. The idea is that every time we have new ideas, we're going to create new Mozilla Hub spaces, or new, doesn't have to be Mozilla Hubs, new social virtual spaces in which to showcase art. And from there, we also, it was the same month, we also won the funding from the city of Vienna for creating a media art festival here, which is then became Saiva. And we are now preparing the third edition. And the first year of Saiva was fully virtual. So we had to think, how do we make new media art festival fully online that is accessible to the most? And so we had a combination of virtual exhibition that was a single user experience online, as well as a multiple of social virtual spaces in Mozilla Hubs where you could just hang and meet people, or you could watch the concerts, you could have a movie watching, and like all this experience together. And we also, together with Soundframe, had an amazing collaboration with Vienna Business Agency, in which we managed to give 3,000 euro to 6 artists, so 3,000 each, to create a Mozilla Hubs space, so an artwork within Mozilla Hubs. So I will share some links in the chat where you can find all of this. And yeah, we have been chatting before about the whole hybridity, so I look forward to get into that later on.
Thank you, Martina. And now, Zonka, would you please introduce some of the work that you do in the exhibition space?
Sure. Hello, hello. Can you hear me again? I'm muted.
Yeah, we hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool, perfect. Yeah, thanks for having me, by the way, Michael and Mathieu. I'm Sönke Kirchhof, CEO of India Space. We are a Berlin-based company, but we have a small branch in Hamburg and one in Munich for the funding reasons, for example. My background is like originally it's filmmaking. I come from filmmaking and then went into stereoscopic 3D and VFX pretty early days. I would say like 15 years ago or something like this, or even 17 years ago. It wasn't done one day to another. It was like more a transformation process, and so that's how I went into VR as well. I started with 360 video as well about 10 years ago when. We worked a lot, or we still work a lot with the guys from the Fraunhofer 100 Hertz Institute that is based here in Berlin, that are pioneers, for example, in the field of volumetric capture, where we started research on as well about 7 or 8 years ago. And they created this 360 camera, the so-called OmniCam back in the days, that should make the stitching process super easy while the camera was kind of heavy. And I think it had like 12K resolution on the horizontal level. And so it was like a very big camera for these days, and was more meant for home projections and not for VR, because VR wasn't the topic. So, but then suddenly it went the topic, and we already had some experience and moved, of course, in the last years as well, from just linear 360 video to adding layers of interactivity to that. And now, at least since the pandemic, we are more or less completely in a CGI digital environment world and not in 360 video anymore. Which doesn't mean that it won't come back, or that we don't want to do 360 video anymore. It was just like super calm in these 2 years, and we didn't want to travel too much, but of course we have been forced to not travel so much anymore, and so on. So things changed, and so our company content production side changed as well, which I would say was in a way by accident, but was a good thing, because it's in our DNA that we restructurize, or that we define ourselves new after a while and don't get stuck with something as we are working with this new medium. So as said, like we are working a lot on research and development, like volumetric capture, light field cameras, all the things. And next to our production department and our R&D department, we have a rental department where we rent out headsets and cameras, computers, and all the stuff that you might need for immersive media production, or specifically VR, but not only producing, but also exhibiting it. So we have hundreds of headsets here that we can rent out or support festivals and conferences with, which, of course, that was not by accident. We knew in the very beginning that, as well coming from stereoscopic 3D, which is not standard equipment, that out there is a very limited amount of equipment that you can use, and sometimes it's not even in your country, it's somewhere abroad, and you have to check if it's available, and you have to calculate another 3-4 shipping days to it, and so it's pretty hard to find and pretty hard to rent, and so we decided to do it differently and rent out our equipment that we have here. And coming from the film world, of course, I understood from the very beginning that film festivals are part of my life, and not only part of my private life of interest of watching films, but it's the networking, it's the social aspect that happens there that makes perhaps our whole business so unique. Everybody knows about film festivals, even people who are not in this industry are not even into festivals. Everybody knows the images from the red carpet and so on. But of course, that's the prestigious things, the things that go into the yellow press. For us working in this industry, of course, it's a nice element, nice to have as well. But the daytime of a festival and conferences is where we normally do our business, meeting people, connecting with people, socialize with people, pitching new projects, communicating projects that are finished and have to go to market, for example. If we are lucky, we receive awards at the festivals that give a little proof of quality to the project, that makes it easier for us to sell them, for example, to platforms like Oculus and so on. So I was very much aware of the importance of festivals and conferences from the beginning. And while we always rented out headsets in a each festival has other requests at each conference. Some need Oculus, some needs HTC, some need a mixture of that, then some need a kiosk mode player installed, some want the 360 cinema with synchronized headsets. Each job is different in a way. It adds a lot of effort to set up all the devices all the time. But we recognize, I mean, budgets have not been there pre-pandemic, and they are not there during the pandemic. Sometimes you're lucky and there is a little bit of budget, but sometimes you're not lucky and there's literally nothing available. Where we of course have to find a way to make it as simple as possible to dispatch these headsets without creating too much labor to set them up. And so we created a lot of tools during the last years for the rental section, like for example a kiosk mode player or a synchronization software that lets us synchronize hundreds of headsets and either have the sound played back on the headphones, but they are so synchronized that we can even use a sound system in the room. So it must be synchronized between each headset, and there can't be a delay of 5 frames or something, because then you would already recognize it. And all these island solutions, as we always called it, had to be packed into one box, into one toolbox in a way. And that's what we started in 2018 or 19 to develop, and didn't really know how we should call that. Of course, the word of operating system was in our minds, but we knew neither Oculus nor any other hardware manufacturer would like us to install our third-party operating system on their hardware. So we have been a little bit hesitant with how do we call it and how do we use it. And then suddenly the pandemic kicked in, you can say. It was funny-wise, it kicked in here in Berlin in the middle of the Berlinale, where we had our 360 cinema set up, and nobody knew if it will be the last party we are attending, and tomorrow everything will be closed, or how it will end up. And perhaps that was a moment when we recognized, and people had been talking much more about platforms and online solutions, where we recognized, oh, this tool that we developed has a lot of these, or the toolbox has a lot of these tools inside that we can easily communicate as a platform. So we did exactly that. We, of course, we tweaked a little bit. We had to build a first more visual thing that not only has the functionalities, but as well like a venue, for example, and talk to these partners that we work with, like Brand, for example, in Hamburg, or Stereopsia, that I'm attending since more than a decade, and listened to them carefully and heard that they need a solution. And sometimes I didn't even know what exactly the solution should look like, or what exactly the solution could do. But we found a few festivals and conferences that have been at least open-minded enough that recognize it shouldn't be an experiment for them. They have to run their business. They have to have attendees there. They can't afford that people are leaving because it's all buggy and not working after an hour. So exactly what we normally did on location was having trained hosts there that makes the experience a super easy thing for the audience. They don't recognize the technology. They don't struggle with anything. Had to be done online now without any hosts and by educating ourselves as well on things. Long story short, yeah, we created this platform. Lucky-wise, it was recognized, for example, at the VR Days in Amsterdam, I think 2 years ago, and awarded with a Halo Award. It was called from the beginning Metaspace, as our company is called VR Space, and we thought it's kind of a metaverse. Years later, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook decided to change their name to Meta, which sometimes gives us a feeling, okay, we've been a little bit too early, a little bit ahead of time, but sometimes it goes like this, and you have to feel, okay, we have not been totally wrong in a way. So we're doing still the same, while I must admit, in June, I was 2 weeks in France, 1 week in Paris for new images, and then a week back in Berlin, and then a week in La Rochelle for Sunny Side of the Docks, or Pixie. Which felt a little bit like, okay, now we are back in pre-pandemic times. We're traveling again 2 weeks a month, not in the office, but at a conference festival, which I highly appreciated. The venues have been amazing. They had in the city hall and in a church, and like very unique. And I definitely appreciated that and recognized again that we never created a platform as a product. We are not selling a product here. We are not uploading it to Steam or to Viveport, and people can put in their own environments. We are having this product at hand, and we are supporting festivals and conferences and art installations, whatever kind. People who come to us who need an online solution that is customized for them, with the function exactly they need, with the visual style exactly as they want it, and not something that you can download and modify a little bit, but more or less what you see is what you get in the end. So yeah, I mean, Michael already raised that question. I don't want to answer it ahead, but I have the feeling it's a very interesting time again, where we can discuss exactly the topic of hybrid and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and where we benefit from what we learned from the past 2 years.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sönke. And you kind of led directly into, for me, one of the first questions, and there's a lot about this, but I think the most important question is always, what type of work, what type of artwork have you experienced, do you think is best suited for a physical installation, or a purely virtualized digital exhibition, or something hybrid? And I would think that the work that can be hybrid and is actually the work that is best experienced in a hybrid manner, I don't know that I've seen it. So I feel like this could be the newest form, right, of work. But I would ask you, how would you characterize the works that are most suited for immersive digital, physical, or hybrid in your experiences? And that's whoever can come to that conclusion first. That's a unprepared question.
I would say, from my perspective, the more immersive it is, and immersion doesn't start and doesn't stop with a headset, but with the installation itself in a way. Like think about projects like Carnegie Arena from I don't know, when was it released, about 2018 or 19, whatever. And you had to go to the location and visit it, because the whole installation was part of the immersive work. There are others as well that you can name, but I think that's the most popular one. The more it goes into that direction, the more it has to be something where you travel to and go to and have a very unique immersive experience. And the more it's going to be a 360 video that doesn't need to be watched synchronized with other people, the more it can be experienced totally online. That's my take.
I think for me, it's about finding a right balance, right? So it shouldn't be, as you said before, let's say a virtual project that I'm just showing in a monitor on a physical exhibition, or the other way around. It shouldn't be like a sculpture that I just 3D scan or photograph and put on a slideshow on a website. I think it's really about having the perfect balance between what is living on a virtual space and what is living in a physical space, and how they communicate with each other. I don't know if that exists, if that has been done, but I agree also with the fact that it is maybe, some very site-specific physical setup of a project that then happens on a social virtual space as well. So that could be a good way of thinking of the hybrid. For me, it's always like think of what you can't have in one or the other reality. So you can't have maybe the smell. So you are working with the smell on a physical space, but then on the online, there is all the other aspect that you can't have in the physical. So it's really about trying to not overrule with one reality or the other your project. I try to do something like that. I was talking earlier just with you about, I had this project I did in Unity, which needed a lot of processing power. It was like a real-time generated dance moves on many, many clones of my 3D scan body. And I really loved it. But then it was time of pandemic where I couldn't show this in a physical space. So I had to adapt it to Mozilla Hubs. And so I had to bake animations. I had to reduce the polygons of the models. It is a super nice, I still enjoy Mozilla Hub space. It's a weird one, but it doesn't, it's kind of the same project into different levels. And so I try to show it at the same time in Vienna, where you would have one screen showing the actual simulation with all the power it needed, as well as the Mozilla Hub space at the same time, like 24/7. And at the opening, I try to also I hybridify myself, and I had Bluetooth headphones on, so I could be connected in Mozilla Hubs, but also I was present in Vienna, so I was talking with physical people offline and with online people on Mozilla Hubs at the same time, and it was hard. My brain made some twists there for a couple of hours of that, but I did enjoy. I think I would like to see more of this. I think it's about caring, but caring what is supposed to be on the physical is about caring about what is supposed to be on the virtual.
Well, it's kind of tricky question. Well, from let's say I think it's not about the artwork itself, but to how to maybe choose the ideal conditions, so the experience can be let's say felt as really immersive. For example, during like the festival, and we select when we select the artworks to exhibit in one of the venues, we consider like many many parameters. Let's say, for example, the artwork can be great, but we actually cannot be, for example, embedded in the space, or it can be actually, for example, in virtual reality, we need to think how to put this artwork next to another one, so it can be contaminated by the sound of the other, artwork or any other, dimension. So we think there are many things like going on, especially in the context of exhibition. Let's be before going to the hybrid, aspect. For example, for let's say a virtual reality experience, we it depends, for example, on the artist, whether he or she prefers to just put the headset and like create an intimate space, so can the user or the visitor like enjoy the experience, or like make it like a whole installation with like by adding other elements, and for the other visitors, because we have the solitary experience that is for the persons that will be wearing the headset, and also people that will be coming and watch this person. So many things are considered. So for virtual reality, it's kind of, let's say, if the artist choose to make it like a simple experience, just put the headset and maybe sit on a chair and like let the users like experience the environment like this, it's okay. If there are other elements, for example, and maybe if we let's say or not erase them, like take them off or something, maybe it will be it's gonna betray, let's say, the artwork, it like the meaning of the artwork. So this is a choice, like to be made, to be made. So can we like exhibit the artwork and not betraying the artist's intention or the spirit of the artwork? So this is one dimension, like for just a virtual artwork. For the hybrid, for a hybrid experience, I'm just thinking about this time, like in July 2021, when we organized this exhibition about a virtual exhibition, real exhibition. We exhibited these online artworks, and we invited this artist to make a performance in the virtual world and to interact with the visitors in the real world. And we also invited Julie Walsh as a curator to present also all the artists and she was working with, and present Mozilla Hub and to gather around, in another virtual space. So we add many layers of virtuality here. It's not easy to actually, let's say from an organizational point of view. So it does work. We need actually to, for example, program it and like announce it to the visitors and put that on the program and everything. So we can make sure that, for example, we have a certain amount of people at the specific time, and the artist can interact with them. Because if you will be staying the whole day in the virtual world, and expecting, this is also a little bit problematic. We also have this the technical constraints, like for example, can she or he speaks with many people at the same time, one person. So in this context, we had like one mic, and so it's one by one, and we think also of how the artist is experiencing on her side this hybrid dimension of like performing, interacting with the visitors, and at the same time one by one, and how how she always experienced this hybrid dimension. It's not easy, and I hear you, Martina, when you say it's exhausting, because you need to multiply also your attention, because she was in a virtual world. She was, interacting with virtual visitors and real visitors. So I think like it was a nice experience. It was like a challenging one, but if we had to do it again, maybe we would think about another way of doing it, so we can avoid, this many channels of like interactions that maybe not, uh, interfering in a correct way, let's say, or in a smooth way.
Hmm. It's interesting because that's Martina had mentioned before, having this is before the talk. She was in this interacting with the physical attendees and with virtual, and there's a certain performance aspect to this because people they see you interacting with people they cannot see, or they hear you interacting with people that they cannot see, and you're obviously the subject of attention, but not in a functional, not in an informative way. It's in a, how disconnected, how the artist in that sense, Martina in that sense, but then the other artist you're referring to, is this bridge between the physical and the metaverse. You know, they are that single bridge between. I wanted to, and I want to make sure I have two questions. I definitely want to get two questions in before we open up to some Q&A. But Sönke, you mentioned, you know, that for works that really require immersion in the work, that the installation is really important. And I think, I mean, at least for me being new to the conferences, in 2020, that was the conclusion that everyone seemed to come to. The thing that was missing from Venice in VR Chat in 2020, and I think for other festivals in the early half of that year, was the installation of the work. That's what everybody told me, is how important that was. And because, specifically Zonka, and actually Martina, you as well, because you have built spaces, virtual spaces, and actually Elhem, you as well in 2020 maybe as well you did. When you built virtual spaces, in some cases you have effectively a virtual installation. Can you talk a little bit about like what makes that successful or less successful compared to the physical? How can you recreate that? What I call, when I talk to people, I say it's priming. Before you put on the headset, you are prepared to go into that virtual environment and that virtual experience. Everything about waiting in line or talking to people, putting that whole thing is preparing you. Whereas I do know from experience and doing a lot of like support tech for Venice and for other festivals, when people are at home and they're just like cycling through two or three or four or five different works, I mean, there's like a fatigue factor. They're just jumping from one to the other. There isn't that same type of palate cleansing as they walk and process what they just saw to go to the next one. So I'd like to ask you guys, what if you can comment a little bit about virtual installations and what maybe can make them successful or not?
I think for me there are two different aspects. Like if I think just when I was curating or like creating the virtual spaces that would then have artwork in it, there was a long discussions of, okay, we have to target as many people as we can, as many ages as we can. Can't be boring for the youngs, must be easy for the ones that are not used to. And so what we ended up was basically creating a sort of like starting point where you get, without even turning, like if you can't turn with your keyboards or headset, you just get all the information on how to do that. So that was like the practical thing. But also what was very, very interesting for me was the whole discussion on how the space should look at all. Because we have artworks that were made for the virtual, so they, you know, they were not having like classic floor, rooms, ceiling, doors, windows. They were crazy going for what the virtual allowed them to do. And so we wanted to do the same with the spaces. So all the spaces that we created with Soundframe and Saiba and the area for visual art, they are all very abstract. They form a space that you can easily navigate. So it has a sort of floor that you feel familiar with, but it becomes a sort of artwork per se, the space as well. It becomes like a sort of like exhibition design, if you want. So we changed the space of Mozilla Apps in a space that we liked. And what I really enjoyed was the part of the avatars, because even if you don't see your body, you will see everyone's else body in Mozilla Hubs. And I do appreciate Mozilla not going for the classic male female default looking avatars, that they have the fox and whatnot, the panda, but still, you know, it's a, you know, it's an art festival. Although we love the fox and the pandas, we wanted to have a bit of more refined kind of bodies. And so we went for completely abstract shapes with different textures and colors. Up on your mood, you could always change your body there. And we realized like people just like really went back to the space just to learn more, to change their shape, to look at art. Well, when I think instead for my own art, I just try to do the same as I did before in whatever's, like, I just try to think site specific. Okay, Mozilla Hubs allows me that things. I'm going to try to work with this limitation and be creative about. I never did such things, but like I could imagine the same if someone would ask me to do an installation or a performance in VR chat. I would just try to figure out what I can do with that. I think it is complicated because you have all these limitations, but I love to have limitations because I get creative usually with that. And I think to just try not to replicate the real, or like, I don't like to call it real, but like the physical is the best thing you can do. Like the virtual allows you to do anything. Maybe let's not try to do, doors, windows, floors, and ceiling also in the virtual.
Yeah. Elhem or Zonka?
Shall I go?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, um, so about this question and how what about this virtual, the virtual experience and the in the as a whole. I agree with Zonko when he said earlier that like the virtual experience doesn't begin and ends on like in the virtual headset. So in this preparation that you were talking about, Michael, like how to enter, like kind of like kind of a ritual, let's say, or kind of preparing the visitor to enter progressively in another dimension, let's say. So there are many levels. I think from in the context of an exhibition, for example, when we exhibited online art in many, artworks that were created on Mozilla Hub. So the question is how you make the experience different from just being at home and like going on your browser and
Okay.
put the link, etc., etc. How the experience can be different, and from let's say the scenographics point of view. So it can be the light, the way the devices are also displayed, like the keyboard. Is it like a big keyboard? Is it a little one? Are we using a joystick? Are we using a VR headset? What is necessary to the experience? What is not? Also, the question of sound is very important when you even when you put a headphone or something, and this is one of the let's techniques to make the experience more immersive. But for example, if an artist says, actually, I don't like to use a headphone, and I want the sound be surrounding the visitor, something kind of like in the space. So we also need to understand all the aesthetic and artistic choices that make the experience meaningful also for the artist who created it, and also immersive. But for immersion, again in the context of exhibition, I do believe that let's say we have all the money we have in the world, and there is no financial constraints, no technical, like we can have everything. So I think for one single, for one artwork, we can play with light, we can play, with like how to create an intimacy also for the artwork in dialogue with the artist, if it's one of the dimensions that he needs to add, for the experience, or maybe more collective, it depends. And if it's on a bigger scale, and thinking more about the concept of an exhibition. So the dialogue between artworks is very important, and how also, for me, we can create a meaning. between different artworks without I don't recall that. Maybe you can help me without creating a dissonance. Yes, between all of them. And this is also it's invisible. It's not about the devices, the displays, etc. They are choices that makes the whole, meaningful. For example, it's because we are not uh, in a context when the experience becomes an instrument, like, yeah, do it, and then go to the next one and do this experience, and etc., etc. So and the fatigue also you mentioned, it's very important. For example, um, um, oh, if we have, and we had like many, like about six artworks, VR artworks, very, very interesting and very visual, visually overwhelming too. Uh, but for example, for me, I can do more than a couple of VR experiences, for example, per day, because of the fatigue, etc., etc. And even for our mediators, we had a partnership with the university, and the students were like dealing with the visitors and how to put the headset, and they needed to put the headset and do the calibration or whatever, and by the end of the day they are exhausted and they didn't even know why. And I think we need to an exhibition is more like it's just not only about the immersion of the visitor, is the whole, because what will make the whole work is to consider every let's say every person involved in the experience, from the visitor to the mediator to anyone. So
That's yeah. I'd like to give Zonka a chance to respond to that earlier question, but you're setting up my final question, which we'll get to. But Zonka, I don't want to.
Right.
Preempt.
Well, it's not already said. I would say that I would definitely second. I mean, the important factor is always that no matter if it's online or if it's offline, the things have to add something. As I already said in the beginning, for me, meeting people in reality, the social aspect is definitely something that adds a lot to the experience of having on-site real meetings, real festivals, and so on. But I remember as well when the pandemic started that I've been quite exhausted by traveling all the time to all the festivals, not knowing if it really all makes sense or if I should stay for 3 days or for 5 days. Sleeping in a hotel, I mean, it's all first world problems. Complaining now that sleeping in a hotel room might be exhausting, but it is in a way. And talking day long to the people, and then after a while you recognize, okay, one day would have been totally enough, but on the other side you think about the carbon footprint when you're going to New York or LA or whatever from Europe. There's a lot of question marks always connected to that, and I think one important thing is, of course, we now know online platforms. We know online platforms like the ones that are already named here, like Mozilla Hubs, for example, or the ArtChat, or Engage, or Spatial, or whatever. They all have specific functionalities, but they all lack a lot of functionalities. And there is a lot of room for further developments that might be exactly, and I think Martina mentioned that before, we don't have to copy paste things now. We don't have to create rooms with windows and doors. We have to create something that is artistically, something that really adds something to the experience of being in an online version of the event, which of course must include the social aspect, because I think that's why we are there and not just downloading stuff from the online stores or libraries. So there must be a social aspect of that, and that one must work. That's why I'm, for example, not a big fan of the ArtChat, because it does not work at all. And you have to be separated in different groups. They have instances, for example, so you will not go to the main hall and bump into everybody. You will only bump into a selection of who was there first and isn't that instance, for example. The other option is, of course, that you can see visual stuff that you will probably not be able to see on location because there's no budget for the installation around it, because there's no space for it, for example. There is no time because it has to be set up in a rush because it's traveling. There's so many reasons for so many, and then perhaps you can experience it because there's a long queue and people reserve their spot already 3 days in advance, and you are coming there and recognize, oh, no tickets left for me. So there's a lot of aspects that might add a layer to the online version, beside the fact that you are not going to be exhausted, that perhaps you have kids to take care about at home, that you have perhaps deadlines to focus on, so you can't leave office. The carbon footprint already mentioned. There's a lot of aspects that make it very, very, very attractive to stay home and watch the virtual version and run into other people that do the same as well, or even meet with other people who do the same. At the same time, I think Elhem just mentioned the fact of not being able, or not everybody is able to stay a whole day in a VR headset, which is not even necessarily needed. Our platform, as well as others that have been already mentioned, are running on Windows computers as well. They don't necessarily need a VR headset to be used. We are even creating Mac builds because in our industry, in the media industry, there's so many people using a Mac that we had to address them as well. What we are not doing for several reasons at the moment, we could, but we are not creating versions for smartphones and WebXR, because WebXR does not really. There's so many limitations. Martina mentioned she sometimes need limitations to be creative, but the limitations in WebXR are so huge that I really feel them as a limitation. And smartphones are a little bit too small for all the things that I think should happen in there. So thinking further of what we learned in the past 2 years, where we can add layers of extra stuff that you will only be able to experience in the VR or non-VR versions of the platform, is definitely a thing that will make it attractive to stay hybrid. Perhaps at a certain point, like in the beginning, when all the festivals and conferences had to rush and find a solution immediately, of course, they didn't have a proper budget and they couldn't think through a new ticketing model for the online version, for example. And they didn't want to scare people who cannot come and know there's only an online version to be forced to pay 10 euros for a ticket or something. I think we are a step further now, and we could offer specific visitors a specific price that might be a different one to the one you will pay for the on-site event, or perhaps it gives you access to stuff that you will not see on-site but only in the online version. These kind of things to make it a sustainable thing for the festivals as well, and not only, or conferences, and not only a second layer of work that they have to care about. And then we might end up in the situation that some things are not done very properly because it always has been considered as an add-on. And if it's considered an add-on, the things will not add any layer, and people will get bored and bothered by that and will not visit it. So I think we are now at this tipping point in a way to rethink what we did in the last 2 years, how we can build on that and make it really an appealing experience that we can stick to hybrid events for those people who are not able to, like, for example, we're creating the platform for the Melbourne Film Festival again. I wouldn't go for 2 days to Melbourne. It's completely on the other side of the globe, but I'm happy to see the VR experiences and meet people who are there, for example. So that's my take on that. Let's make it attractive. Let's add layers to that in a visual way, in a functionality way. Yeah.
Thank you, because that's continuing the lead into kind of the final question, and I'm very conscious of time because I know we plan to go about an hour. So if you guys have a few extra minutes to respond to this last point, I'll just say I'm coming from a market that is a little challenged economically at this point. So coming to European festivals was always something that was quite aspirational and has only become more so. And we're not alone. I'm in Turkey. Turkey's a fairly large market, and certainly people can travel. But there are many parts of the world where people suddenly were attending virtual events and virtual exhibitions that had never been attending the physical before. And I have to say, and Martina and I were talking about this before we got on, it's that whole experience, that accessibility, which is accessibility means a lot of different things for a lot of different people because it's there's so many challenges to accessibility. But at least in the context of geography or economics and travel restrictions and such, virtual and hybrid events really creates a value, but what is that value? And if I was an artist or a curator or someone who's advising an institution who's going to put together a festival, originally I was going to ask like which would be easier, right? Which is the simplest, the least headache, but between a physical, a virtual, and a hybrid. But I want to add a little bit more to that. Like, where do you see the sustainable? Which is the most sustainable? And I'll go ahead and preface by saying I think hybrid is really tough because it's to date they tend to be two separate events done simultaneously with the same budget. So part of me finds that I think it's the most desired, but it's also the one that's perhaps the most challenging to make sustainable. So I don't want to prejudice anybody's response, but I want to throw that out as the last question to get your responses to.
I think, yeah, I wish hybrid would be something that it's more sustainable at this point, in terms of money, in terms of cleverness, also like to think not, as you say, not as a same event, two different formats, offline, online, at the same time, making everyone crazy. But it's a problem of budget, I think. It's a problem of organization. It's a problem of time. Most of the institutions, most of the exhibition spaces, they have a full program for the full year. And just to squeeze in some online or some virtual or some hybrid for them, it might be tricky. Budget-wise as well, like some institutions have a lot of money, can afford a lot of equipment that would make the hybridity easier, but then some others not at all. So I, for example, meanwhile, I'm working with web AR, and I need some sort of device to show my AR in a physical space. I need a tablet, and the tablet has to be for me only. It's an art, like the tablet with the AR is my artwork. But then sometimes because of budget reason, it ends up to be like it's one of the artwork being shown. So I find like, or in a screen, like if my work is on a screen, my work is it's the screen. But then sometimes you have the slideshow again of artworks. I think totally agree. Hybridity at the moment, I think it was not really a focus, and so a lot of people just knew or hoped, well, we are online now, and then soon we're going back to what we did before, which was working. I think that was mainly the problem, that there was not a really willful effort to think about hybridity as such. I think for all the reasons we have listed before, I mean, virtual is the most sustainable in terms of like footprint. I mean, we are not moving from home. Yes, we are using electricity. Yes, we are online, but we're not taking an airplane every 2 days to go to festivals or meet people. I want to add also very social aspect, like some people, I really have problems in social event in the physical. I really have trouble connecting, networking, which is really, really sucks for my kind of work because that's what I should do. But I just enjoyed these last 2 years of meeting people online. I've met so many people. I've become friends with so many of them. I've seen so much art I did not see before because I just didn't go to openings anymore. So I think for a lot of people, not only geographically, but also personally, that was such a change of finally being able to feel they could be out and see art and experience art. So I think, unfortunately, I can say this because I do virtual art. I think, for me, it's more sustainable that way because I don't do physical art in that way. I don't do sculptures, really. So I think that is mainly the issue, that for people that do mainly physical art, for them, the most sustainable is continuing doing physical exhibition. And for people that do virtual art mainly, being online is the most sustainable decision. So I think that's why the hybrid would be the best choice, but it's not the one that we can afford right now, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Martina.
Perhaps just to add again, and one of you already said that it feels like it's two things at the same time to organize. Perhaps this is part of the things that have to be rethought then, having, for example, an online version the week before the on-site version, so that everybody does not have the feeling he loses something if he's not traveling. But if you're in the city anyway, or whatever reason, and I think some have been mentioned here already, there is something happening afterwards. I think the other way around wouldn't work. Having the online event after the on-site will not really work out. But and that is just one idea out of many, where I have the feeling, don't do two things at the same time. That does not work out, and it's super exhausting for the people doing it. But find creative ways around it in a way. That might be a solution, one solution to tackle this. Because I really have the feeling we have to learn lessons out of the last 2 years. That one of these lessons is we have to do things more online than we did offline before.
I totally agree with you and Martina when you said that, like, for all these reasons, you know, financial, like everything related to make like a hybrid event or a hybrid exhibition, it's very difficult, and it creates, you know, a lot of I think if something has to be done, you know, in the proper way, and like it has to be like that, like 100%, if it's 100% virtually or 100% in the physical world. So it kind of like creates a lot of noise for sometimes for like little effects, like so I don't think that the hybrid is the sustainable one, at least for now, for the reasons that we explained. But I don't know about the virtual, because I always think about you know, in my I don't know, I really don't know, so I'm questioning the whole thing at the same time. Because I always think about those people who don't have any, you know, high performance, like equipment with high performance. So if everything become, let's say, virtual, and we need to access platforms that requires like a good, very good, you know, graphic card, etc. The question that I'm asking, are we depriving maybe some people, or some maybe let's say social classes, from this kind of events, because they don't have this kind of equipment, and they don't have these kind of phones, or even it's accessible through a phone, like the right phone to access the platform. So I'm just thinking about, like, this is something that we should not also forget, because it's what's the whole point behind the virtual by the end, and the question of accessibility. So to be also, because the internet is a democratic by its essence, a space. So and uh, and so how can we, through the virtual, so can the virtual be the sustainable one, maybe include all everyone? So it's just a question.
I just wanted to briefly add, because when you said, which is true, like, of course, certain platforms we have been using or we have been creating, they are very heavy. They can't really run, I mean, they could theoretically run on phones, but like just newer phone and all these things. And I think, like, I had to look to make sure the name was correct, but there is this platform, New Arts City, and I really like what they did there, because it is a virtual space, and it's a social virtual space. It's also very interesting, like, you can only be a wireframe diamond looking shape, but you have a chat. But they do this thing that if you have not too powerful internet or a device, you can download the full exhibition as a sort of catalog with very, you know, low res pictures or videos. So it is very quickly to download if you are in places where, or situations where your internet is not stable, or your computer is too old, or your phone is too old, or whatever. But I do like this thinking Of course, there might be different and better way to do that, but I like this thinking of even hybrid formats within the virtual itself. So you have the full VR exhibition with all the possible interaction and so on, but then you have a version or the different. I think you said it before, like all these layers, and I think to think in layers, it's a very it probably is something we should start to do, learn from the mistakes from the past and do better.
I mean, what strikes me as the challenge of the layers, and Sonka, you had to deal with this when you build Metaspace because you had these different types of entrance points, the different types of hardware constraints. Is these layers kind of in some way replicate hierarchies? They're experiential hierarchies. You know, you see this a lot in Rec Room. You have like the VR people and the non-VR people, and they know immediately who's what. And there's a little bit of a social class aspect to that, little rivalry. And I think, you know, most of the big platforms don't really support mobile devices for obvious reasons, but platforms that do, you know, there's just a fundamentally different type of presence that hardware affords. And so it's like letting you in, but you still know that there's limits on your experience. You know, and I mean, to be honest, we're talking about what type of technological solutions can solve a fundamental human problem, which is, you know, like for example, we talked, and Elhem, you were right on when you talked about like the social classes of who has the equipment. You know, someone could be 1,000 miles away and have that equipment. Someone 200 miles away doesn't have that equipment. Which one are you choosing to enable? Which would you know? It's there's no right answer right to that because it depends on the case and a lot of other. I mean, it's again, you know, I think it's careful. We should be probably cautious as practitioners in immersive art, not to try to think that the technology that we work with really can more easily or has this burden to solve fundamental human problems any more than anybody else or any other exhibition has. But on that point, I'd like to, and I'm sorry, we've gone quite over, so I definitely don't want anyone to feel that they have to stay any longer if you have other obligations. But if there's any questions from or any comments or anything you want to share from the audience, I'd like to give a couple minutes to that, and otherwise, then we'll wrap it up and thank everybody for coming. And that looks like our speakers did an incredible job of addressing everything that every audience member was potentially thinking. And yeah, I'd like to thank all of you again, Zonka, Elhem, Martina. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your time, Matthew. Thank you for hosting us. And thank you everyone for attending this session. So I think there'll be a video shared a little later, hopefully, depending on resources and such. Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you all here and to hear from you.
To be continued.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you.
In reality or in hybrid.
Yes.
See you guys. Thank you, Michael.
See
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.